I'm going to cover how professional violinists tune their violin and also how you can tune your violin with a tuning fork and in fifths. Now, why would you do that if there are easier ways to tune your violin? Now, it's first of all great ear training, and secondly, you tune your violin into perfect fifths. Now, if you use any kind of tuner, you tune your violin as a piano is tuned in equal temperament. And the piano has distances between all the notes that are all the same. All semitones are the same. But if we look at the natural resonance, then a fifth is slightly larger. So if I tune my violin in fifths and I have the same A tuning, then if I tune my A and E string based on the fifths, then the E string is a little tiny bit higher and the D and the D string are a tiny bit lower. Now maybe at first you don't really notice this, and also, you know, if you hear a piano, you're probably not sitting in the audience like, oh, this is awfully in tune at equal temperament, so you're fine tuning your violin with a tuner, but I wanted to have this covered anyway. Now you might be wondering, why do you tune the A string first? And why, when an orchestra tunes, the oboe is playing the note A? It's simply practical because every stringed instrument has an A string. And usually the oboe player will tune his instrument with often an electronic tuner, and then he will give the A. Now, because of the bright and penetrating sound of the oboe, it's really easy for the whole orchestra to tune to that note. And because orchestras do this, players simply get used to start tuning with the A string. So that's the only reason why to do that. You can perfectly start tuning with the D string. The only reason why I would suggest to not start with the E string and going back to the G string is because if your instrument is very out of tune and you start tuning the E and the A string, you get some very unequal tension to your instrument, to what it's not built for, and then your bridge can collapse. You can imagine that if you tune like the middle strings first, that you have some stability on the bridge, and if your instrument is very out of tune and you just tune the E string, then the E string can push the bridge in the direction of the G string, and we don't want that. So that's just a little thing. Outside from that, it's just a tradition thing. It's something you might want to get used to because you might want to play in an orchestra one day, but no police vans will appear at your door if you start tuning the D string, for example. At least I don't think so. Might depend on the country you live in. Now, a tuning fork works in a similar way as a tuning note, actually. Because what a tuning fork does is you have to hit a surface and then you hold it beside your ear, or some players like to put the tuning fork on their instruments, but I'm always a bit afraid of my varnish when I do that. But it will just give you the A to tune with. And it's perfectly okay if you take that A from a piano, or if you take that A from a tuning note in, for example, my online tuner. So that doesn't make much difference as long as you have an A that is in tune. So when I hit the tuning note, now you can hear that, and then I make my open A string and to have not much time between hearing the tuning note, still a little bit too high. So then you have an A string that is in tune. Now what you do next is that you play the A and the D string together. Wow, this is very out of tune. All that tuning examples. Now this might sound familiar from what you hear orchestras do. Now then you just tune until the A and the D string sound together as a perfect fifth. Now this is exactly why this method isn't so suitable for beginners, because you are not so familiar with the sound of your violin, and maybe you'll tune on a sixth or whatever, or a third, so, or an octave. That sounds nice as well. So that's why I recommend starting with tuning this way until you feel familiar, and that all depends on how well you can hear it. Now then we have the D string tuned, then we move to the A and then we move to the D and the G string together. And then let's move to the A and E string. So you listen how these two strings sound together. So that's how a professional violinist tunes his or her violin.